Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to this afternoon's live stream. It is now Halloween week, and I am in the mood for some spooky tales. So, rather than doing what I traditionally do and record those tales and present them for you in the form of a video, I figured this afternoon it would be fun to do a live stream of the spooky tales. And it's kind of amusing in so much as I suspect I might have a hard time reading these tales in this light with this mask, but that's going to add to the fun, I think. Certainly to the pacing of the tales. And today I want to tell you some stories linked with houses, with homes. Yeah, we've spent so much time uh, at home this year, enforced in many ways due to the ongoing situation globally, and I figured why not consider that haunted houses, haunted homes, places where people live and die, of course. And good afternoon, Matthew. Good afternoon, Beck Mech. Nice to see you both, Mr. Beck, Mr. Matthew, and I think that as the weather's getting colder, as the nights are drawing in, as the garden is filling up with lovely orange leaves, incidentally, lots of leaves outside, I figured, why not? Why not reflect on the house and the home in today's tales, or this year's tales, as it were? And we're going to start with the story of John Wesley's home. John Wesley was one of the founding members of the Methodist movement, and therefore is a good candidate for someone who wouldn't be easily spooked or swayed by uh, by negativity in his house, in so much as he had a strong faith in God, and would have to have, in so much as he started the whole Methodist Church. But seemingly something haunted him and his family, and his home, and it's one of the most well documented hauntings in history, in so much as there were lots of witnesses and lots of accounts. So here we go, John Wesley's nightmare. ah, the servant who answered a knock on the door of a Lincolnshire parsonage was mildly annoyed to find no one there when he opened it. He blamed playful youngsters, but when only hours later he watched a corn-grinding hand-mill turn without human help, he realized that something beyond his understanding was at play. The events of that December day in 1716 heralded a 2-month nightmare for the devout household at Epworth. The Wesleys' ordeal was chronicled by one of the family's children, John Wesley, who was to become founder of the Methodist movement and church. His sister Molly was the next person to notice something strange. As she sat reading in the library, the door opened on its own, and she heard footsteps walking around her chair, accompanied by the rustle of petticoats. I've already heard about petticoats this month. My gran used to tell me a ghost story involving petticoats quite a lot when I was a kid. One by one, the rest of the family told their own eerie experiences. Rappings on a table, mysterious footsteps on the stairs, bangs in the hall and kitchen, and the sound of an invisible cradle rocking in the nursery. At 9:45 each evening, a man's steps were heard plodding down from the northeast corner of the house. The Wesleys christened him Old Geoffrey. John's father, Samuel Wesley, became convinced that the spirit was an agent of evil, testing the faith of the family. Finally, he challenged it to leave his children alone and to meet him alone in the study for a showdown. It was to be a spectacular confrontation. When Mr. Wesley tried to enter the room, a powerful force pushed the door back in his face. He struggled through and began asking the phantom to identify himself. His questions were unanswered. no, sorry, whose questions rather were answered only by a furious knocking from each wall in turn, building to a crescendo. Terrifying crescendo. Just imagining the noise. That kind of thing. It'd be incredible. But the parson's faith and nerve were unshakable. Gradually, the spirit's apparent anger subsided and sounds faded, and the house was left in peace. The Epworth haunting is one of the best documented cases of poltergeists that are heard but not seen. These are agitated, playful spirits. They are among the more common spirits that materialize, and in many ways even more frightening than visual and audible ghosts. The word poltergeist is derived from German, where the earliest cases were reported. In 355 AD, people in the village of Bengen am Rhein were hauled from their beds by unseen hands and subjected to an onslaught of stones and strange noises. 5 centuries later, the same thing happened at nearby Kempden, when a disembodied voice accused the local priest and some villagers of misdeeds. Wonder what those misdeeds were. I'll have to look into that. What was that again? Was it Kempden? Kembden. In 1721, the Groben home of the German Oriental scholar Professor Schupart was invaded by an invisible terror which threw furniture about. His wife was bitten, pinched, and knocked down, and the professor was violently assaulted by an invisible attacker. Incredulous neighbours witnessed this incident, and since then poltergeists have been reported all over the world. So yeah, poltergeists in homes, and this is actually something which I have talked about in a previous Halloween year. My home had a strange incident one year where the kitchen utensils were spread about across the floor, seemingly in the time it took for me to leave the house and arrive at work. It took about 25 minutes to walk the distance, to half an hour. And when my mum got home, the house had been, well, not so much ransacked, but violently reordered, shall we say. Strange, strange. Now, the second story I want to tell you is it's of the Enfield Terror, and actually there's also a link that I want to share. I'll put it on the video description for this stream when we're done. But also I'll share it on the Soupside View Facebook and Twitter feeds as well. And the Enfield Terror, in that sense, is a very well-known ghost story. There's the link I want to share with you is it's a documentary that was put on Channel 4, which is a bit sensationalist, but it's a good sort of flavour of the story that I'm about to tell you. And it too was a very well documented house haunting. It was a poltergeist again, but seemingly of a previous resident. This one definitely identified itself, and seemingly the family of the deceased confirmed many aspects of the ghost story. So, yeah, the Enfield Terror, or in this book called "The World's Greatest Ghosts." It's the chapter is known as "Knock Twice for Terror," this kind of thing. So, yeah, it's an infamous case. Good afternoon, Matteo. Hello. How are you doing? Hopefully you're doing well. The Enfield Terror. From the outside, it looked like any other house, but too many people, called in to investigate the house. The strange happenings there meant that they knew differently. Journalists, psychic investigators, even the police came to the same conclusion. The rented house in North London, in the suburb of Enfield, occupied by Mrs. Peggy Hodgson and her 4 children, was haunted. It all began in September 1977, when daughter Janet, then 11, heard a shuffling noise in her bedroom. It sounded like someone walking in loose-fitting slippers. 4 loud knocks followed, and Janet was horrified to see a heavy chest of drawers slide away from the wall, which is not easy to do. If you've ever tried to move a chest of drawers, especially if it's full of clothes, it's a heavy, heavy object. In the days that followed, other objects, including a heavy bed, began to move unaided. A hairbrush flew through the air, hitting one of the sons on the head. A policewoman who was called saw a chair hurled across a room. But fright turned to terror as the thing that haunted the house extended its powers and started to influence the children's behavior. The girls, both in their early teens, spoke in coarse language with the voices of old men. But their lips did not move. The sounds just seemed to come from within them. It also appeared that the children's lives could be in danger. Mrs. Hodgson's 9-year-old son Billy escaped narrowly when a heavy iron grate flew across his room as he lay in his bed. As Janet lay asleep, she would suddenly find herself hurled into the air, awake, screaming, blimey. And actually, there are some very famous photos where they set up sort of motion-captured trigger devices. One of them where it does look as though one of the girls has just been picked up and thrown across the room, and she's like, ah, kind of thing. It looks also as though she might be jumping, but eyewitnesses say that they saw this sort of thing happen without her jumping. So, yeah, unnerving times. On one occasion, the strange force nearly killed Janet as she lay in bed. A nearby curtain wrapped itself tight around her neck. Hearing her daughter's choking scream, Mrs. Hodgson rushed to the room and fought to pull the material from the girl's neck. The family considered moving away from their home, but for a divorcee with 4 children, in the 1970s of course, such a step was not easy, and the family feared that the thing might follow them, for there had been strange voices and happenings when they were on holiday at a caravan at Clacton in Essex. To be fair though, I mean, it's Essex, so who knows what's going on in Essex. Many of those who heard the family's plight were quick to dismiss it all as childish pranks, but not so the experts. Pye Electronics, P-Y-E that is, electronics specialists who visited the house were baffled to find the video recording equipment, which worked perfectly well outside, would not function at all inside the house. A policewoman was called in and admitted, "I saw a chair lift into the air. It moved sideways and then floated back to its original position. I have been called to the house on several occasions, but there isn't much police can do with floating furniture." That's a fair point. Psychical researcher Maurice Grosse, and Maurice is famous in the investigating the paranormal world in those spheres. He's in this documentary as well. So again, check it out if you have time. In fact, I'll probably watch it after I'm done with this stream this afternoon. We can watch it at the same time. Maurice Grosse tried communicating with the thing using a code of 1 knock for no and 2 knocks for yes. Did you die in your house? 2 knocks. How many years have you lived here? Or did you live here? 53 knocks. This was followed by a barrage of knocks, and bewildered, Grosse asked, "Are you having a game with me?" In answer, a cardboard box filled with cushions leapt off the floor, hitting him squarely in the head. It was Janet's sister, Margaret, who shed some light on what was happening. One night, when she was asleep, she began to bounce up and down in bed and cried, go away, you 10 little things." Still asleep, she gave certain details about them. They included a baby, 3 girls, 2 boys, an elderly couple, one of whom she identified as Frank Watson, and the man who died in the chair downstairs. Ew. So she's being haunted by 10 little ghosts around her bed, and one of them was Frank Watson, who died in the chair downstairs. The frightening, throaty growls began to come from Janet's direction, but investigators were convinced that she could not have made the sounds herself. One day, the voice told researcher Grosse that his name was Joe, and on another day, his name was Bill Hobbs. He said that he came from Durrance Park graveyard. Hobbs, whose voice was being taped, told them, "I'm 72 years old, and I have come here to see my family, but they are not here now." The hauntings lasted 3 years, and then they ended, never to resume. Now, I seem to recall in the documentary, and actually also I think Janet, the daughter, she's become slightly infamous as one of the main victims of this haunt. At one point, I think she was floating in the bedroom. People, I think a lollipop lady outside the house and looked up and saw her floating. And she has a well, she's been affected by it, shall we say? One might even say she's been slightly damaged by her experiences. So it's a on the one hand, that documentary is quite entertaining. On the other hand, if you really consider certainly how she's presenting as being so damaged, it's quite unfortunate. Now, the third tale I want to tell you is about a rectory, and it seems in these three tales so far, we've had two homes of priests or parsons or pastors, and this tale is from the most haunted house in Britain, or at least it was, until it burned down in mysterious circumstances. It's an infamous place amongst those who enjoy a good ghost story, and this chapter is entitled "The Riddle of the Rectory." A dark, gloomy mansion on the border between the English counties of Essex and Suffolk has been described as the world's most haunted house. And even though the building, Borley Rectory, burned down mysteriously in 1939, its legend lives on in the strange happenings near the spot where it once stood. A 23-room red brick house was built in 1863 for the Reverend Henry Dawson Ellis Bull. That's a heck of a name, isn't it? Henry Dawson Ellis Bull, my name is, and I am a priest. Or a rector, reverend. As soon as he and his family moved in, they heard puzzling sounds at night. Footsteps and tappings were followed by bells ringing and voices answering. Ghostly chanting was heard from the nearby village church, and soon the disturbances took on a more physical form. One of the 14 children, 14 children in them. Wow. Well, I suppose it's a religious family, so, you take what God gives you, I guess. One of the 14 children in the family was awakened one day by a slap in the face. Another claimed to have seen a man in old-fashioned clothes standing by her bed. A nun, a phantom coach and horses, a headless man, and a woman in white were all reported in the grounds by passers-by or servants. In 1929, 10 years before the house burned to the ground, poltergeist activity began. Pebbles, keys, and mementos flew through the air for no apparent reason, and a cook told her master that a kitchen door locked each evening was inexplicably open when she arrived for work the following morning. Now, to be fair, that could be someone who's a bit peckish, couldn't it, going down to the kitchen? But it could be a ghost. Just before the Bull family moved out, newspaper reporters kept vigil one night and noted an eerie light in a deserted wing of the building. The Reverend Lionel Algernon Foister, oh wow, Lionel Algernon Foister, that's a heck of a name, and his wife Marianne moved into the rectory in 1930, and the baffling incidents continued. Curious messages started to appear on the walls or on scraps of paper urging Marianne to get help. "Marianne, get help!" they would exclaim. Mrs. Foister also heard a disembodied voice call her name, and she was later attacked by an invisible assailant. Soon after that, the couple fled for a more peaceful home, and who can blame them? I certainly can't blame them. Ghost investigator Harry Price, founder of Britain's National Laboratory of Psychical Research, recruited a team of volunteers to document exactly what was happening at Borley. They reported sudden drops in temperature of up to 10 degrees, curious incense-like smells, stones and cakes of soap thrown across rooms, and books moving as if they're on their own accord. A Benedictine monk had tried to hold an exorcism at the rectory and was hit by flying pebbles. When Captain W. H. Gregson bought the building and renamed it Borley Priory, uh, he thought the new name would fix the problem, but instead it brought the jinxed home no better luck. In 1939, it was wrecked by fire. Several people claimed that as the flames raged, they saw a young girl at an upstairs window. Witnesses told the village policeman a grey-clad nun had been sighted slipping away from the inferno. Ooh, maybe it was set by a mysterious order of nuns to try and combat the evil within. Ooh, who can say? Even though the rectory was destroyed, arguments about its ghosts raged on. Some said they were the spirits of a monk and a nun who had eloped from nearby Bures, B-U-R-E-S, centuries before, but had suffered the traditional punishment when caught, decapitation for him and being buried alive for her. But a London medium, Helen Glanville, claimed that during a 1937 séance at her home in Streatham, she was told that the Borley ghost was that of Marie Lair, a nun induced to leave her convent at Le Havre, France, to marry one of the Waldegrave family from Borley Manor. She was strangled by him in May 1667 on the site where the rectory was later built. Okay, well, that's some bad juju. In 1943, excavations of the ruins revealed fragments of a woman's skull and skeleton 4 feet below the ground, together with a number of religious pendants. Were they the bones of the unhappy Marie, or were they, some suggested, the remains of a plague victim from even earlier times? The rectory may be long gone, but its supernatural residents outlasted it for many years. Chauffeur Herbert Mays heard the thunder of invisible hooves as he drove past the shell of the building one night. During World War II, air raid wardens were called to the ruins several times when lights were reported at windows that no longer exist, on floors that are no longer there. And as late as 1961, car headlights, cameras, and torches of inexplicable no, sorry, oh, I see. Sorry, and yeah, I told you reading in the red light is not practical at all. And as late as 1961, car headlights, cameras, and torches all inexplicably failed to work during investigations of the site. Just like um, the recording equipment at Enfield with the Enfield poltergeist. Only a few miles north of Borley lies the Suffolk village of Polstead. There, too, the rectory is said to be haunted, and when a young Irish vicar moved out after only 5 nights in his new parish, the church put the 350-year-old building on the market, claiming it was much too large and expensive to maintain. The Reverend Hayden Foster, 35, arrived in Polstead from Dublin with his wife Margot and son Gerard in April 1978, and for 4 nights they all slept soundly in their new 16-room home. On the 5th night, the couple moved to another bedroom to accommodate guests who had travelled for Mr. Foster's induction ceremony the next day. What happened that night was enough to make the family pack their bags in the morning and move back to Ireland. Blimey. Mr. Foster told a reporter from the local newspaper at about 3 a.m. we were lying half awake when Margot saw the walls of the room change from being freshly painted to peeling, damp, old wallpaper, just as it might have looked 20 or 30 years ago. Ugh, that's like Silent Hill. Just everything changing around you. She heard screaming like a child, but it wasn't their child, Gerard. and then she felt as though she was being strangled or suffocated. She was trying to say the Lord's Prayer, but she couldn't get it out because of the overwhelming force around her neck. I felt too that there was a real danger in that room. There was a definite feeling of evil in that place. And so, of course, the church had to sell it, to the public. Naturally, that's just what you do. Villagers in Polstead were not surprised when the Forsters left. They knew the legends about the rectory. Some said they had seen a procession of monks crossing the road outside its gates, their sandals 6 feet above the ground. Ooh, wow. Others recalled that the Reverend John Whitmore, vicar from 1795 to 1840, had held an exorcism service in the house, but it seemingly had not kept. But the diocese bishop, Leslie Brown, had not been told the stories. He said, "I knew nothing about the rectory's reputation when the Forsters arrived, and if I had, I certainly would never have moved them in. The previous vicar had said nothing to me at all, and when I asked his wife about it afterwards, she said, 'Oh, well, we got quite used to hearing footsteps going up and down the stairs, and children screaming in the night.'" I have to say, my lovely wife would not get used to that. We'd never get used to hearing footsteps going up and down the stairs and children screaming in the night. Now, there is one more story here that we could read if you're up for it, and this is probably the most infamous house haunting in the world. It's one that became a Hollywood movie, or certainly inspired a Hollywood movie, the Amityville Horror, and this one is notable because obviously it happens over in the US and not here in Britain. But the author has deemed it creepy enough to be included in this book. So unless there are any objections, I shall continue. This chapter is called The House of Evil. Amityville Jinx hit actor. Actor James Brolin is certain there was an evil jinx on the film The Amityville Horror, in which he starred. He played survivor George Lutz, who, with his family, was driven from his home by a terrifying series of demonic happenings. The film was based on the best-selling book by Jay Anson, to whom the Lutz family told their nightmare story. Brolin said, "On the first day of filming, I stepped into the elevator in my apartment block and pressed the button for the lobby floor. Before we'd gone 3 floors, it shuddered to a grinding, screeching halt, the lights flickering, and I was plunged into frightening darkness. I screamed for help, but nobody could hear me. It was an eerie, frightening experience. You imagine all sorts of hair-raising things in the darkness and silence of an elevator suspended above the ground. My pleas bounced back like an echo, and for those 30 minutes, time stretched out like an eternity." I imagine they would. The jinx hit again the next morning. I'd been on set less than 1 minute when I tripped over a cable and severely wrenched my ankle, said Brolin. I hobbled around in pain for days. The film recorded the horrifying events experienced by George and Kathleen Lutz and their 3 children after they moved to Long Island, New York, to a house which had been the scene of a multiple murder in 1974. Ronald Defoe, 23-year-old son of the wealthy car dealer, had drugged his parents, brothers and sister at a supper, and at 3:15 a.m. he stalked them from room to room, shooting each of the victims in the back with a rifle. Guns. Note the creepy nun didn't, or the screaming child didn't have a gun in the UK. No, it's a tragic story. He claimed in court that voices had ordered him to commit the crime. Defoe was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences. For the Lutzes, the house's macabre history had given them the chance to buy a dream home at a bargain price of $80,000. So I suppose, yeah, the murder house was going cheap, so yeah, they bought it. And seen in bright daylight, it was a beautiful three-storied colonial-style residence, set on a well-kept lawn, which sloped gently down to the bay, and with its own boathouse as well. In the small middle-class community of Amityville, this was a show home indeed. Soon after the family moved in, they asked the local priest, Father Mancuso, played in the film by Rod Steiger, to bless the house. Author Anson wrote, "The priest entered the house to begin the ritual. When he flicked the first of the holy water and uttered words to accompany his gesture, Father Mancuso heard a masculine voice say in terrible clarity, 'Get out!' He looked up in shock, but he was alone in the room. Who or whatever had spoken was nowhere to be seen. For the first 2 nights in their new home, the Lutzes were awakened by strange noises at 3:15 a.m. But the real horror began on the third night. As usual, Judge Lutz checked that all the doors and the windows were locked before going to bed. The noises roused him again at 3:15, and this time he went downstairs immediately to investigate. He could not believe what he saw. The heavy, solid wood front door had been wrenched open and was hanging by one hinge. With mounting terror, he realized it had been forced from the inside of the house. The thick steel doorknob spindle was twisted, and the surrounding metal plate had been forced outwards. From then on, the house seemed to have an evil life of its own. Windows opened and closed at will, and a banister was wrenched from the staircase, only to be dropped heavily into the hallway. 2 weeks after the front door incident, George woke in the night to find his wife Kathleen floating, goodness me, above the bed. George pulled Kathleen down by her hair and switched on the light. He was shocked to find that he was not looking at his attractive young wife, but at a hideous, twisted vision of her. Kathleen caught a glimpse of her own reflection in the mirror and screamed. "That's not me! It can't be me!" Her appearance, though, changed slowly back to normal over the next 6 hours. A few nights later, Kathleen was in the sitting room with George when she looked up and saw two glowing red eyes at the darkened window. She and George hurried outside and found strange tracks in the snow. Kathleen told Anson the prints had been left like cloven hooves, like those of an enormous pig. After only 28 days, the Lutzes fled their dream home and that had become such a nightmare. As they hurriedly carried their belongings amidst a series of unearthly noises, green slime oozed from the walls, and the ceiling and dripped with a sticky black substance coming out of the keyholes also. Because of the curse, the film men dared not to use the actual house. They found an almost identical building in New Jersey. They knew only too well of the frightening things that had happened to people connected with the story, and a photographer went to take pictures of Anson immediately after photographing the Amityville house. While he was in the author's home, his car caught fire and billowed orange smoke as it stood empty with the engine switched off. Blimey. Anson himself told of terrifying events linked with his book. He said, "A woman to whom I loaned some early chapters of the manuscript took it home, and she and two of her children were suffocated in a fire that night." Wow. The only item in the apartment that was not damaged by the fire was the manuscript. Another man put the manuscript in the trunk of his car and attempted to drive home. He drove through what he thought was a puddle. It turned out to be a 12-foot deep hole into which the car slid. When the car was fished out the next day, the only dry object in it was the manuscript. Wow. And when my editor picked up the completed manuscript at my office, his car caught fire and he discovered that all the bolts in the engine had been loosened. Anson himself suffered a heart attack, and his son and friend were nearly killed in a car smash. The Lutzes today are alive and well in California and planning another book about their experiences. Their Long Island House of Horrors is now owned by James and Barbara Cromartie. They say that the place is not haunted. Whatever the truth of the movie, The Amityville Horror, it will remain a chillingly realistic record of paranormal events. Director Stuart Rosenberg says that he would not have taken on the project if it was just another horror movie. He insists my first reaction was that it wouldn't be my cup of tea, but I read Jay Anson's book and it had the ring of truth about it. There you go. And that's actually a film I haven't seen. I think I would like to see it at some point. Yesterday we watched a couple of good films, though. I watched for the first time the Exorcist. Well, The Exorcist 3, technically, but actually it's the true sequel to the first Exorcist movie, and it's nowhere near as downright terrifying as the Exorcist movie. It's actually much more like a police investigation, but it's also got some good creepy things in there. The lady crawling on the ceiling. We watched Trick or Treat, 2007, I think, movie by the same guy who did the Krampus film. That was a lot of fun. We watched that. And what else did we watch? Ready or Not. Ready or Not. Magnificent. Matteo, loving the stream, but I have to go. Hope to be back in time for another spooky story. Well, to be honest, those are my stories for today. Unfortunately, it's always fun doing these, but yes, I've four stories for today. That's quite a few. But thank you for joining me, and I'll see you soon, Matteo. Yes, Ready or Not. Brilliant story about a woman who marries into a family with a twisted ritual. What's the word? Initiation, shall we say? It's a horror movie, but it's also a comedy. It's well worth watching. A lot of fun. And of course, on Halloween Eve, we're going to watch The Crow, as ever. It's become our tradition on Devil's Night to watch The Crow. We're catching up on The Walking Dead at the moment. Almost on to season 11. Oh, brilliant, brilliant! Yes. I've watched up to season 10. But I'm waiting for season 10 to become available on Amazon before I continue with the story. It's getting better, isn't it? It went through a bit of a downturn. It's definitely getting better. You're very welcome for the stream, Beck. It has been fun. And also, I suppose just on that note, though, what I would say is The Walking Dead: The World Beyond. Has anyone seen that yet? Because I've been watching the new episodes when they've been coming out on a Friday. The most recent one came out, obviously, a couple of days ago. Have you decided if you're going to play Resident Evil 2 or Resident Evil 7? Yes, Resident Evil 7. That everyone seems to want 7. To be honest, I kind of want 7 as well. I think it's a really fun experience, and also now that we can live stream using the Elgato, it'll look much better on the live stream. It went downhill a bit. It's better than in the later seasons. It is, isn't it? The World Beyond, though, I'm finding interesting. It's got terrible reviews. Lots of people on IMDb are saying it's Walking Dead Nickelodeon show, and I can see why they're saying that. But I think what they're trying to do is go for something which is trying to explore, well, as the premise of the show says, the first generation of people who grew up in the zombie apocalypse. And so it's got a slightly rebellious tone, a slightly gentler tone. It is in places still quite scary, though. But some of the they have this sort of this art style, which is also reflected in the in the posters for the series. But so when in the for most recent episode, there's a moment where one of the young people, one of the characters is imagining what the past was like, and she imagines a past that is sort of vibrating almost in like a 90s graphic way, lots of squiggly lines kind of thing. And I kind of like it. But the only downside is the fact that it does feel a little just a touch watered down compared to the tone that you get in The Walking Dead or Fear the Walking Dead. That said, though, each season so far they seem to be trying to have their own character. Fear the Walking Dead definitely went down a slightly more comedic, well, not comedic, I suppose, so much as um, quirky route, but certainly with its introductions every week. So I'm willing to see where the world beyond goes, and then of course they're leading to a Walking Dead movie at some point as well, aren't they? So yeah, I guess we'll see what happens there. And now, of course, that they finished the Walking Dead comics, I can finally. I have an end point. I know how many volumes I might have to get if I want to finish that story, which I kind of do. So I'll probably get around to that in the near future. But it has been fun. I mean, seriously, I would read stories, all for an hour or so. But to be honest, I want to save some, every year. Otherwise I'll be I'll run out of stories, and like in next year I'll just be like, so, I don't know. Did you see last year's live stream? Check that out. But this has been precisely what I hoped it would be. Thank you guys for joining me, and I'll see you on Friday for hopefully a 6-ish hour live stream of Resident Evil 7. It should be starting hopefully around 10 o'clock in the morning UK time, so we'll see. Um, I have the 3 compendiums. Not sure if they cover all the Walking Dead. Uh, I'm not sure actually either. I'm not quite sure where the compendium cutoff points were for the 3rd volume. But I've forgotten where I'm up to now. But I've got a lot of the volumes. So there's only a few more to go. Okay, take care, Matteo. Bye bye. Can't wait to the long stream. Neither can I. It's going to be fun. Should be interesting to go through Resident Evil 7 together. So I'll see you guys on Friday, and I'm sure we'll continue these conversations as we play as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. As ever, guys. Until next time, do take care and also enjoy this spooky week as we approach Halloween on Saturday. And in fact, on Saturday we are going to be doing pumpkin carving, making pumpkin pie. We have a graveyard trifle that we're going to make, where you use like biscuits as gravestones on top of the trifle, and you can see all the layers inside. We're going to have a fire pit outside. We've got board games and a spooky Halloween sort of version of Buckaroo that I found in a charity shop. That should be fun. And of course, scary movie. So we've got a big Saturday planned. Should be fun. Anyway, guys, yeah, I'm rambling on now. You guys take care. Bye bye.